Hey guys, France is a beautiful country, and if you're fortunate enough to have the opportunity to go and live there, then you're gonna need to probably deal with the aspect of your personal finances. Having lived in France for about 3 years, having jumped through all of the bureaucratic hurdles that come with personal finance in France, I've decided to make this video following a request from several viewers for more France-related content to help you when it comes to setting up your finances in France. So looking at opening a bank account, looking at investing products, and a little bit about taxation in France as well. So let's get right into the video. So to give a bit of context in this video, I of course live in Spain currently, but prior to moving here, I lived in France. I lived there for about 3 years. I lived in 3 different cities, and I've opened various bank accounts. I've looked at various different investing products in France. And as this was a few years back, things may have become a little bit more digitalized, may have advanced a little bit compared to what my experience was like, but I still think from my experience, I can give a fairly accurate picture of what you can expect when going through all of the different stages of looking at your personal finances in France. So let's go. Now, if you move into France, probably one of the first things you're going to be looking at doing is opening a bank account. Now, this is not one of the easiest tasks to go about, particularly as there's a lot of bureaucracy involved.
Hello, I'd like to open a bank account, please.
Il me faut juste vos papiers d'identité et un justificatif de domicile, s'il vous plaît.
Ah, proof of the address. Well, I don't have proof of the address because I need to get a job first. And in order to get the job, I need the internship. In order to get the internship, I need the bank account. In order to get the bank account, I need the address. What do I do, Jean-Pierre?
Though I will add that at the time of me leaving France, there were a lot of digital banks coming up on the scene, like N26, Fortuneo, where you could open your account completely online, and it made it a little bit easier than opening it via a bank branch. As has been the case in Spain and a lot of other countries in Europe, the advantage of some of these neobanks is that they've shaken up the space a little bit. They've thrown a lot more competitivity into that sector by kind of getting rid of commissions and making banking more accessible and more affordable for consumers. Because prior to the arrival of some of these digital banks, you were very much stuck with some of the big traditional banks such as Société Générale, Crédit Agricole, BNP Paribas, La Banque Postale, for example. And me having opened accounts with a couple of these banks in the past, it was a painstakingly long process. You know, it took quite a while to do, a lot of documentation involved, as I say, and it wasn't completely free to have the account and even to have a debit card, which we'll come to just in the next part of the video. So with that in mind, whether you go via a traditional bank account or whether you go via one of the newer digital or neobanks, what I would say is allow plenty of time for this bank opening process, because it can take a couple of weeks. Even in one case for me, it took up to a month to get a new account. And of course, whilst you're arriving in France, you know, you'll need to pay for groceries, you need to pay for everyday expenses. You probably got, you know, deposits on an apartment perhaps, accommodation costs to pay. You might need somewhere to get your salary paid into. So do make sure you have an intermediate solution in place whilst you get a French bank account set up. Now, coming back to payment by cards, now a lot of banks will of course issue you a card. There may be some fees that come with the card, and it'll commonly be known as a carte bleue in French, which is just a name from the past, which is kind of stuck going forward, even though a lot of the cards that are issued today are Visa or MasterCards, and an actual carte bleue kind of was done away with in the early 2010s. So there's 3 important things to look at when you're looking at a bank account and a card that comes with that bank account. So number 1, as I say, the maintenance commissions. How much are they going to charge you a month, if applicable, for you to have a debit card or a MasterCard or a Visa card, and what type of card are you having? You know, is it a metal card? Is it a credit card, or is it a debit card? Because again, different fees will apply. Second thing you want to look at is what are the spending limits on that card, because even though this is a bit more applicable with the traditional banks, it is still something that is common in France. So you might have, it might be 1,000, it might be up to 2,000-3,000 euros a month that you can spend with the card. So just be aware of that as well. And third, you need to be aware of how much money you can withdraw. Typically it's on a weekly basis, so it might be a couple of €100, it might be higher up again. It depends, because several banks, they offer kind of different tiers. So, you know, the more you pay in commissions per month for a particular type of card, that will obviously increase your spending and withdrawal limits as well. From my experience in France, having an overdraft or a découverte, as it's known in French, is not a common thing. So if your account does end up overdrawn, then it's not a good thing. And of course, penalties will apply. So do be aware of that as well. Particularly if you're coming from the UK, you know, where arranged overdrafts are quite common, then it's not necessarily as common in France. Now let's look at saving products in France. Now in France, there is a very common savings account known as the livret A, which is a very standard savings account. You know, it's what pretty much every French person has when it comes to their go-to kind of savings pot. Over the past few years, the interest rates on the livret A haven't been great. When I was in France, it was around about 0.75% interest per year. But of course, recently the European Central Bank have been increasing interest rates. So the livret A interest rate at the moment is currently 2%, and that's expected to stay in place until around February of 2023. You can open a livret A with as little as €1.50, and you can deposit up to about 23,000 euros in it as well. And any interest that you earn on your balance is tax-free. Do be aware though that you can only have one livret A at a time. So if you open one livret A with one bank and later you want to change banks, the best thing to do is just transfer your livret A across to the other bank, rather than, you know, trying to open another one, because the banks, they are able to check what accounts you've got and it will end up, you know, flagging in the system. So it's probably best just when you're transferring banks, you know, just take your livret A across with you, because I believe a lot of banks can do that along with moving your bills across as well. Now let's look a little bit at investing products in France. So of course, most banks will offer you kind of a brokerage account known as a compte titre, where you can invest in index funds, ETFs and stocks. And of course, you've got, you know, the traditional European brokers like Trading 212, like the Giro, that also offer these investing services as well. Through a compte titre, you can normally invest in any company anywhere in the world, but you will be subject to French capital gains and dividend tax, which is pretty high. It's around 30%. And that 30%, it's made up of two components. It's made up of about 13% of actual capital gains tax, but then you pay about 17% of charges sociaux, so like social contributions on your investing gains as well. Hence you end up at the 30%. So yeah, if you are receiving capital gains and dividends in an investing or a brokerage account in France, then do be aware that you are going to be subject to much higher capital gains and dividend taxes than you would be in other European countries. There is a tax advantage product though that lets you have a bit of a workaround to this, known as a PEA, or a Plan d'Épargne en Action. Now, I've talked about this in a prior video, so I won't go too much into the detail. I'll leave the link up here if you want to look more into the details. But essentially what you can do with a PEA to save some money on tax is that you can invest in companies that have their stock quoted on a European exchange. And if you keep that brokerage account open at least 5 years, then that will give you a full exemption on capital gains tax on any stocks that you have within the portfolio that you sell. Similarly, it exempts you from any dividend tax as well, as long as it's not withheld within another country. So for example, if I'm receiving dividends from a company that I'm holding in a PEA and the company is listed in Spain, then there would be some withholding tax, but then I wouldn't pay any additional tax on that once I'm in France. But for example, if I'm investing in a company that's quoted on the CAC 40, the French stock exchange, then I wouldn't have any dividend withholding tax and I wouldn't be liable for it as long as I kept that PEA account open for at least 8 years. The only thing you do pay at the end is the charges sociaux that I was telling you about. So it's, you know, it's not ideal, but it gives you a significant reduction if you do invest in the long term. And over the course of your life, you can contribute up to 150,000 euros into those accounts. So, you know, there is potential for some big tax savings if you're a French resident and you do want to save on the capital gains part of things. When it comes to taxes in France, you'll complete an annual declaration known as la Déclaration des impôts in French. And that is due around June every year, if I'm not mistaken. So from around April or May, you'll be able to access your draft declaration on financepublique.gouv.fr. I think that's the website. And essentially, if you're employed, then any tax that's been withheld by your employer will already be in there. And then you just need to include, you know, any self-employed income. I believe if you're self-employed in France, you also complete regular declarations. So that may be included in the declaration already. And then you can, you know, of course, any investing gains as well. On that government public finance website as well, you can complete your tax declaration online, which is really handy. Another good thing which can come in useful as well is that in every city you have an office of Finances Publiques. So if you have any doubts or you have any queries about how to complete your tax declaration, then you have people there who can help you with your queries as well. And so just to finish off, just to leave you a couple of useful resources when it comes to money in France. So of course, you've got the financepublique.gouv.fr, which is where you can find out kind of the current regulation regarding stuff like the livret A, like the current interest rates. You can find out more about the PEA, income, dividend tax, all that kind of stuff. Another couple of sites that I found investing when it comes to comparing, you know, different offers with different banks that they have on at the moment were Detective Bank and also Moneyvox. Both websites in French, but if you're able to navigate those sites in French, then you know it will have a good range of information about all the different banking offers that are out at the moment. So I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Leave a comment and let me know, have you been to France or are you living in France, and what has been your experience with your personal finances whilst living there? Till next time, I'll see you on the next one, and let's get this money.